Greetings, Cap fans, and welcome to episode 10 of the Captain America Comic Book Fans podcast. I am your host, Rick Verbanis, and I'm joined by my partner, Bob Lucius. Bob, what's happening?
Man, this is unusual for me today, Rick. I'm actually up in Boston where I am freezing, and because I'm a Florida guy now. So, but I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to talking about the Flag Smasher tonight because I love that guy.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a lot of fun getting into this character. Before we do that, though, episode 10, Bob, we're double digits.
Wow, that's incredible.
I know. You know what they say about double digits? Once you go double digits, you can't go back.
Oh, man.
What I say? I don't know. But, yeah, so we're talking about Flag Smasher. Because, coming up in the Falcon and Winter Soldier Disney Plus series, there's going to be a whole bunch of characters in that. And one of them, from what we understand, is going to be Flag Smasher and perhaps maybe Ultimatum. So we thought it would be a good idea to talk about the origin of Flag Smasher and get into some of his early issues, early stories. Plus, he made our top 10 villains list in our last episode. So, I thought it'd be a good idea we talk about him.
Yeah, I definitely. I'm glad you pointed that out because that was a fun episode to record. And I hope folks got a chance to listen to it.
Yep. All right. So this is we're going to start with issue 312. The cover date was December 1985. Yeah, which means it, hit the stands probably in September, October of 1985. And just so you know, with issue 312, we're only about 6 issues in Gruenwald era, right? So Mark Gruenwald, as all Cap fans know, was a pivotal writer, legendary writer for Captain America for 10 years. And this is the very beginning. So he started with issue 307, and he took over after Mike Carlin did a brief writing stint for Cap with issues 301 to 306. And then Mike moved over to editor, and Mark moved from editor to the writer. And so just before issue 312, a few things happened. Nomad quit as Cap's partner. We also had the Serpent Society begin to form. So there was a lot of those characters being introduced, and the society putting together. So these are the things kind of leading up to this particular issue in 312. And I just want to talk about the cover quickly. The cover has up in the corner, we have a different Captain America logo. I mean, well, it started in issue 304, but it's Paul Neary. So Paul Neary has been the artist on this series since Mike Zeck left. So he's been a fairly stable creator on the series. And on this particular cover, which is 65 cents, and only, I think, 2 more issues, and then it jumps up to 75 cents. But this is, it's a cool cover by Paul Neary, and Bob Layton is the inker. And I got to tell you, I like Bob Layton's inks on Paul Neary, probably because it has more of a Bob Layton flavor to it, which I enjoy. And the other creators on this particular issue, we have Dennis Junk as the inker, Diana Albers as the letterer, Ken, I hope I get this right, Fedunowitz as the colorer, and I already mentioned Mike Carlin as the editor. So the name of this particular issue is called Deface the Nation. Not Face the Nation, Deface the Nation. And so it starts late at night. Over the background, we have the United Nations, right? We have the UN here.
Hold on, Rick, we got to stop, man. We gotta talk about this cover, man.
Okay. Oh,
man,
I hear you. Yeah, I totally on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this cover is awesome, right? I mean, it's got the American flag draped across the front of the cover with Flag Smasher just bursting through a burning, gaping hole in the middle of the flag. Well, Cap's just like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah, it is stunning. It's
Now,
certainly attention.
I gotta tell you, I think the flag smasher here looks a little bit like Space Ghost, but I'm willing to let that slide because he looks pretty damn cool coming through that flag.
He looks a lot like Space Ghost. If Space Ghost had a flamethrower on to his back and the Earth on his belt, but other than that, yeah, I hear you. Cool cover for sure. So getting back to the story, there's this shadowy figure who is flying on some sort of looks like a ATV three-wheeler with wings, jetting over the sky, and he's going around with this mace, hitting all of the flags. One would say smashing and knocking these down across the United Nations. And he has his little thing that he's talking about, giving his villain monologue. So I'll skip to page 3 where he says, "The United Nations, feeble, pathetic, farce, a misguided attempt to promote unity among peoples of the world. To think that good men with good intentions waste their time with such charades. If only I could open their eyes to the counterproductiveness of organizations like this. Perhaps tonight's demonstration will help them see the light." So he then drops a bomb on a police car and shows that he's a bad guy. So we cut to the next page on page 4, and there's Cap there. Well, I should say Steve Rogers and Bernie Rosenthal. And Bernie is going over the fact that she's applying for law school. Steve's at the artist board, and there's a knock on the door, and there's somebody there who has delivers this particular thing that needs a signature. And the reason it needs a signature is because it's a pretty important document that he got. It's a check for almost $1 million. So the Steve basically explains to Bernie, he says, it's my back pay. So when I dropped out of sight back at the end of the war, Steve Rogers was never officially declared dead, probably because the top brass knew I was Captain America. Anyway, a short time back, I filled out a form letter requesting info on my current status, which was issue 247. And he said, I guess this is the result. So Bernie and him start talking about, well, what are you going to do with all this money? So he says, I have to do something with it. When I filled out the form letter, I attached a note telling them to keep the money. Very Steve thing to do. The letter accompanying the check says that it's impossible. Bureaucracy. I must tell you, it makes me mighty uneasy to have this much of the American taxpayers' money, all because of a legal technicality. Now, $1 million is a lot of money, but it was even a lot more back in 1985. So Bernie corrects him. And she's like, didn't earn it? Are you kidding? No one's worked as hard for this country as you have. And he says, look, I never asked for a single cent. I saw my duty and did it without thought of personal gain. It's just not right for me to spend this money on myself. But maybe there is a way to put this money to good use. So then he goes to talk about this boy that he met in the last issue when they were fighting the awesome android. And he comes up with that, you know what? I think what I need to do is I want to do a nationwide hotline, a toll-free telephone number that will enable any American who has a problem demanding attention of Captain America to reach me directly. So, Bernie and him talk about, all the different problems that can come up with that, right? You're going to get inundated with calls. You're going to get pranks. You're going to get people that, need to go through and determine, which ones take priority over others. But they decide to do it. And so both Bernie and Steve go to work and Steve hires a PR agency. Bernie starts looking at talking with the telephone companies and private answering services. So they're gonna do something good with that money.
Yeah.
Keep
in mind, this is way before social media, right, Rick? Because right now, like, what would Steve do now, right? He'd have his own Twitter feed or his Facebook page or something like that. TikTok, he'd be on TikTok, right? That solved the problem.
What problems you've got? Yeah, well, to point that out, on page 6 in the third panel, what does Steve do when he picks up his landline? He grabs the yellow pages.
There you go.
We know it's a little dated. All right, so now we cut to page 7, and we have Bushmaster and Diamondback from the Serpent Society, and they're basically trying to track down MODOK. So they're in this abandoned AIM facility, and they can't find MODOK. They get away for some deadly traps, and they set a time bomb. So that's setting up another story. Flag Smasher goes on to do more of, smash some flags of all things. Then we cut to Cap talking with the PR agency. They basically found a place in downtown Brooklyn where they can set up the place for the call center. And then Cap says, you know what, the PR agency said, I need to make a big media splash. So I'm going to do a press conference. Again, because they don't have social media. So that's what they're going to do. He's going to call a press conference. So this goes on TV, and the announcement is about this press conference. And we cut to this Park Avenue penthouse. And there's a young, fit man who's watching this. And then he turns off the TV after hearing about this press conference, and he looks at a picture that's sitting on top of his TV, and it's a picture of a older man, and he says, "Do you hear that first news story, Father? This country's nationalistic figurehead is going to be making a public appearance here 2 days from now. Sounds like a perfect opportunity to challenge the fool and crush him and the ideals he stands for." And then he goes on to give his backstory, right? And because we did say we were going to get into the origin of Flag Smasher, I think we should go through this backstory. And I will point out that Paul Neary, the artist, decided to kind of tell the story in flashbacks by the use of old photos that this character has. And so there's different photos. And then in the meanwhile, in the background, he's changing into his Flag Smasher costume. So what he says, as he's thinking in thought bubbles, he says, "Oh, Father, if you were only here to see how I would have carried on your fight for peace, how I've devoted my whole life to the cause, even as you did. You were the heir to a Swiss banking family, but you forswore business to go into world politics. Your dream was to foster world peace. It was a dream I grew to share. Sure, it was tough growing up an ambassador's son, always moving from one country to another, always feeling a foreigner. I tried to fit in. I learned to speak the language of every country I lived in fluently, but still, I was picked on. I could never understand the prejudice I encountered almost everywhere. The differences between me and them seemed so slight. But through adversity, I grew stronger, mentally, spiritually, and finally, physically. I was just 12 when I took up the martial arts to control my anger. We were living in Tokyo then. By 15, I earned my black belt. I was never picked on again after that. Then, a few years ago, we came to America. You had become a delegate to the United Nations. I enrolled at Columbia University. I majored in political science, determined to follow you in your footsteps. That goal was violently shattered. A demonstration outside the Latvian embassy erupted into a riot. You were caught in the middle somehow, trampled in the melee. What dark irony. You, a man of peace, killed at a supposedly peaceful demonstration. Why did you die? Because you loved the whole world, while others, all they cared about was the petty little countries of their birth. And so, with that vast fortune I inherited from you, I implemented my own way to bring peace and unity to the world. Your beliefs were absolutely correct, Father, but you were about sharing them far too passively. Not me. And by this time, he's in his uniform. I will bring them the message of peace through world unity, even if I have to destroy every symbol of separatism on earth. The only way to get the message through to the people of the world is to put it into the only language they can understand, the universal language of violence. With every resource at my command, I will fight for the glory of a unified mankind, and woe to who stands in my way. So that, done in a 1.25 pages, is the backstory and origin of Flag Smasher. Now, I do have to poke a little fun at Paul Neary here. I told the listeners that he used these different photos to kind of tell the story, as little black and white photos framed, sitting throughout his place there. And I get some of these photos, right? You got one of his dad, you got one of him, learning martial arts. Okay, sure. I'm a proud dad of my son was in martial arts. I took pictures. Sure, I get it. Hey, there's a picture of him and his dad in front of the UN. Of course, I would do that. But who gets a picture of them getting picked on in the yard by his schoolmates, classmates, right? Like, where's that picture come from? Oh,
yeah, who took that?
And then here's a picture of people getting trampled during a peaceful demonstration. Who does that? And then the best one. Here's a picture of him over his dad's open casket. Who takes pictures at funerals?
Well, I think you're being culturally insensitive, because, there are cultures around the world where they do that. And, Flag Smasher, he traveled around quite a bit with his dad. His dad was an ambassador. So maybe he picked up some strange habits, or habits that seem strange to us.
Okay. I'll bow to that one. All right. So we move on, and Cap's, it's time for him to do his press conference, right? So he gets in front of the stage. Now, Bernie's there. She's got as she said, a cheap blonde wig on because she wanted to be close by. So he gets there, and he says, "My fellow Americans and members of the press, I thank you all for coming. I'll keep my announcement short so you can all get back to what you were doing." Oh, he's very thoughtful. "Since first donning the star-spangled uniform more years ago than I care to remember, I have considered myself to be America's foremost champion and defender. And what is America? It's a land, government, people. And while I cherish the land, and I think our form of government is one of the best ones yet devised, it is you, the people, that I care most about. For without you, this land is no different from any on earth, and this government cannot exist. Recently, I realized that despite all the good things I've tried to do, I have fallen short of being the champion the American people deserve. For one thing, the bulk of my activities lately have been confined to the New York area, an area where costume heroes are in no short supply. There are certain parts of this country I haven't visited in years. Secondly, I've been a rather difficult fellow for you, the American people, to contact when you need me. True, it has been possible to reach me in care of the Avengers Mansion, but to the average citizen, the Avengers must be a rather imposing organization to deal with. So what I'd like to announce today is that I've come up with a way to close the communications gap between America and me." And just then, Flag Smasher comes busting through this glass, shattering everywhere, and gets out his gun, and he fires these guns at Cap, who ducks out of the way. But behind him is this huge American flag. And Cap even thinks to himself, the gunman's incendiary bullets, were they aimed at me or the flag? And next thing you know, the flag's on fire. So he pulls it down and says, "Forgive me, Old Glory," as he bottles it up to try to stop it from burning. And of course, the crowd is panicking, and he reaches out to the crowd to tell them to stop. So as he's flying around, Flag Smasher, Cap throws his shield, knocks out one of the jet cycle's propulsion units. But before he can, the shield doesn't ricochet back to Cap, which is usually what we see, but it falls, and Flag Smasher gets it, and he says he grab it before the pathetic patriot. "Stop right there, Captain America. One step closer, and I will shoot indiscriminately into the crowd." So he doesn't move. He says, "All right, tell me who you are and what you're doing here." And he says, "Give me that microphone. I want the world to hear." I call myself the flag smasher, Captain. I represent everything you don't. Okay, you Americans, I want you to listen to what I have to say. It'll be the most important thing you have heard in your lives. So Cap says, look, Flag Smasher, this is a free country. Everyone has the right to express himself, but no one has the right to force others to listen if they don't want to hear. So why did you give the people here a choice if they want to listen to you or not? And he says, don't quote the Bill of Rights to me. I do not acknowledge the authority that grants it. Sometimes people must be forced to hear what is good for them. Do not interrupt me again, or someone will suffer the consequences. Am I understood? As I've said, I call myself Flag Smasher. My mission is to stamp out the outmoded concept of patriotism. I begun my going out and destroying symbols of nationalism, those flags at the UN, the flag factory, those foreign embassies. I was the one who demolished or defaced them, and those are just the beginning. I am not against America in particular. I am against all countries. I am against the very concept of countries. I believe all men and brothers sprung from the same primal parent. Tribalism, ethnicism, nationalism, these are all latter-day concepts that in our nuclear-powered world have become outmoded and dangerous. They make people think they are different, special, better than other people. This is wrong. All men are equal, no better or different than anyone else. When you say, I'm an American, what you're saying is that you are separate from anyone who cannot make a similar statement. Every nation fosters the idea that is better than all the others. This is what has brought us to warfare with our fellow beings, what has brought us to the brink of nuclear destruction. If we were to erase national boundaries and accept the essential unity of all mankind, the world would be a better place. Earth should not be divided into nations. We are the world, not a bunch of different species. So Cap, he's been standing here with his arms folded, giving Flag Smasher his chance, and the crowd's all around listening. Look, Flag Smasher, I cannot fault you for wanting to see the world a better place. So does everybody here. But does your desire for peace and unity justify your acts of violence and terrorism? The people you've injured with flying glass, you expect them to heed your words and ignore your deeds? So at this point, the crowd's kind of getting a little riled up, by what Cap has to say. And they start yelling at Flag Smasher. Get real, creep. You tell him, Cap. Go back to Russia, you commie. So he says, what? I'm not a communist. Weren't you people listening? I hate what the Soviet Union stands for as much as I hate what America stands for. Flake off. Get out of the country. What are you people, warmongers? You like feeling superior to Italians and Swedes and Poles and Africans? You want to see this planet torn apart because of petty abstractions? You pathetic fools. I ought to. And just then the police surround the building. They have their bullhorn. They're calling in. And it distracts Flag Smasher just enough where Cap makes his move. He goes in and he grabs the gun from Flag Smasher. He rips out the cord that goes to his backpack and the fuel tank. And but Flag Smasher hits him with the shield, but Cap falls down, kicks it up into the air. He goes and he attacks Flag Smasher, and then he grabs the shield and it comes back down. But Flag Smasher uses, I guess, his remote control to get the little buggy that he flew in on, and he grabs his mace and he comes out and he attacks Captain America with his mace, but Cap grabs the mace and knocks him out with one punch. And everybody's like, yay, Cap, way to go. So he says, people, I'd like to apologize for what happened here. I'm afraid that whenever I appear in public, there's a chance that somebody who doesn't like what I stand for will strike. Somebody from the crowd says, what did you think of all that junk that creep was saying, Cap? I believe my opponent was wrong. There's nothing harmful about having a sense of national identity or ethnic heritage. America is made up of a multitude of different ethnic groups, each of which had its own part to contribute to American culture. Be proud of your heritage, but never let the pride make you forget that beneath it all, we are all human beings who have the same wants and needs and deserve the same respect and dignity. At least that's how I see it. and then he makes a promise to never do a public address again. So before we get into the next story, the next two issues, I think it's interesting. I know we talked a little bit about this when we said, we did our top 10 list, right? The difference between a bad guy and a villain. And we both agreed he's a villain, right? Because he uses terrorist attacks, and he's not against killing people to, the ends justify the means. But is he wrong?
Well, it's a good question, Rick. And I'm not quite sure he's really sort of skirting the villainy thus far, right? He hasn't really killed anyone yet. He's caused some property damage and destruction, and he hasn't crossed that line yet where he's actually killed anyone yet. But I think he's well on his way to making that transition in the continuation of the story that we're going to talk about. But yeah, Flag Smasher, he's got some valid points, but I think we can agree that as Cap states, he's sort of taken those valid points a step too far. In fact, a few steps too far. And he's willing to use terrorism rather than rational thought and debate and discussion and free expression to, sort of explore it. So I think, boy, this guy, that's the worst kind of villainy, right? Somebody who's so convinced that their philosophy is correct that they can't see the flaws in it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's one of the things that makes him such a compelling villain, right? Is that maybe we on some aspects, in some ways, we may agree with them or see their point of view, but the ends obviously don't justify the means.
Right.
Or do they? And we'll talk about that in the next issue.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting thing because as you noted at the beginning of this podcast, this issue came out in really the fall of 1985, and if you think about sort of what the world looked like at that point, right? This was just before really the Soviet Union completely fell apart, and so we had been in opposing camps for decades and decades, since the end of World War II, armed camps, whether the main players, the United States and the Soviet Union, or their proxy players around the world. And so I think a lot of people, including I think probably Mark Gruenwald, were preoccupied with this sort of artificiality of this conflict and where was it really heading, and was it heading where it was heading because of a nation and nationalities and this commitment to sort of national pride.
Yeah, and maybe that's where Mark Gruenwald was going. He certainly has, over that course of 10 years, he's done his share of soapboxes, right, with through Steve. And by the way, I guess we'll mention at the end of this episode, we have a pretty exciting thing to talk about as far as Mark Gruenwald is concerned. So we'll talk about that at the end of this episode. And actually, we'll take a pause and be right back. Okay, Bob. So talking about these next two issues, Captain America 321 and 322. This is the next time that Flag Smasher appears. And it's a pivotal story, I think, not only in Flag Smasher's story, but also in Steve Rogers, because there a lot goes on in these issues. So we want to get to those. But what happened? What happened between issue 312 and 321? So in the pages of Captain America, we had the Serpent Society growing, more members in that, and more stories about them, including the death of MODOK. Porcupine also died during this time. The return of the Armadillo. Birdie, she went off to law school, and Cap actually moved back into the Avengers Mansion. There was a team up with Hawkeye and Mockingbird, which I don't know. I didn't know this. Or at least I don't remember this. But I think Mark Gruenwald had a little soft spot for Hawkeye and Mockingbird because, prior to being an editor, did you know he actually was the penciler for that Hawkeye 4-issue miniseries?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, he had a couple issues there with Hawkeye in it. And then we had the Scourge story, right? So the Scourge of the Underworld was this, who also was in our dishonorable mention when we talked about the top 10 list, because there was multiple of them. But Death Adder from the Serpent Society was killed. Then there was an issue where Blue Streak was killed, and then in issue 319, the new Scourge killed like 17 of these C and D list villains, all in the same issue. And then Scourge was killed. So there was a lot of death leading up to this issue. And I thought that was important to point out, because I think Cap was always trying to do the right thing without killing. And so that brings us to issue 321. Now, for a lot of Cap fans out there and Marvel fans and just Mike Zeck fans, this cover is amazing. And this cover is this black background, and you have Captain America without a shield holding an Uzi in his right hand, firing it, and he has this incredibly angry look on his face with his mouth open, and he looks pretty scary. He looked very menacing. So the name of this issue is called Ultimatum, and just so you know, this issue came out in September of 1986. And the other thing that was going on during this time, and I just think it's worth mentioning, that in 1985, a huge movie that came out was a sequel, and it was Rambo, First Blood Part 2. And I bring that up because really, that was kind of how a lot of people in America were leaning towards. That was like the anti-hero hero, really. And so you had this ex-military with fighting back with deadly force. And a lot of people at the time have been thinking of Captain America as this Boy Scout, right? And and there were some fans that were calling for, like, we would love to have Captain America be more like Rambo. And so I think Mark Gruenwald heard this, and he's addressed it in these stories here and for future stories to come.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point, because around this time, and increasingly so over the next several years, superheroes with guns were kind of a big thing, and I'm really happy that we're going to talk about how Gruenwald addressed that in this book, and particularly with respect to Cap.
Right. Yeah. Punisher miniseries, was big around this time. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. So in this particular issue, it starts off with this airliner, TWA airliner in the sky, and then you see these characters on flying jet skis. They're all in white with black pants, and they're going onto the airplane. Right. And they're talking to each other, deploying grappling hooks. I won't get into everything they say, but I will say there is this one time, if I could find it. Oh yeah. On page 3 in the second panel, the conversation between these guys, keep your distance, Rivik. I don't want you sliding off and taking me with you. The other person says, the electromagnetic grips in my skis are working perfectly, sir. And then the third person says, coming over the top, Mon. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like Jamaican, right?
Yeah. I mean, a nice mix of I think a Swede and a Jamaican, and I don't know what the third guy is, but definitely I hate to use the characterization, but a multinational, anti-national force.
Yes. Exactly, and we get a little bit more of that when they actually bust into the plane, and one of the guys says, "Right behind you, mein Herr." Right, so it's definitely, you could see that it's multinational, and then you have them take off their mask and or the helmet, I should say, and underneath is Flag Smasher, and he walks up to the pilots and takes over the plane. So we cut to page 5. And by the way, I need to get back to the credits. I missed on this. Sorry. It is still Mark Gruenwald. It is still Paul Neary. And Albers on letters, and Fedowitz on colors, So the same people there, but a difference is instead of Jack on the on inking, it is John Beatty, who's been the longtime partner of Mike Zeck. And I also want to point out that it says Neary layouts and Beatty finishes, which is difference between pencils and inks, as our good friend Joe Rubenstein pointed out in our interview not too long ago. So that means that John Beatty had a lot more work on this than just inking. He actually finished, and quite frankly, you can almost see it in the artwork, right? There's a couple different places here where I look and I go, oh, I can see a Zeck influence here. I thought it was worth pointing out. So we cut on page 5, and I think to me in the bottom panel on this has a little Zeck look to it. So that's and you've got Cap in uniform talking to a young boy, and basically his name is Ram Ridley, and he's bringing him a little suit. It's kind of with stars and stripes on it as a reward for helping out with the computer network, so that Cap can be reached out to, during his nationwide network. And his mom there is there as well, and says, "Oh, you need to stay for dinner." So they convince him, and he says, "Okay, sure." So they stay for dinner, and boy, does she bring out this huge turkey. Looks like she was expecting him to say yes, and he takes off his mask. And he says, "Well, I probably look like 1,000 other blonde guys. Besides, I think I could trust you two to not take any pictures." And here we go, Bob.
Here we go.
It's the bubble of the woman, right?
Yeah.
And she goes, "My gosh, he's more gorgeous than I imagined." The only thing it's missing is the Bernie and the Rachel. And then she says, "Stay cool, Holly. Don't make a fool of yourself." So they finish dinner, and so she's like, tells her son, "Why don't you go to your room and finish your homework? I want to talk to the captain about a few adult matters." And he's like, "But I finished my homework." And then she gives him like the death stare. Okay, sheesh. So
No, I gotta give props to the letter, because I love the icy dialogue bubble. Hiram.
Yeah.
I can almost hear it.
Yes, all of us have heard it at some point from our moms, right?
Yes.
So he says, "Thank you, Mrs. Ridley." He's going to pass an American Pie, trying to watch his waistline. And she says, "Please call me Holly." "All right, Holly. So what is it you want to talk to me about, Holly?" And then he says, "By candlelight, she reminds me a lot of Bernie Rosenthal, my once upon a time fiance." So they're there with wine and candlelight. And she just goes on and want to thank him, right? Because she tells a little sob story about their background and how she's single, and that her son needs a good positive influence. And so she says, "Listen, if there's ever anything, emphasis, that I can do for you," and she places her hand on his, "a warm meal, someone to talk to, a place to spend the night, all you have to do is ask." I'll remember that, ma'am.
I gotta give props to Gru for doing service for the teenage boys out there reading this at the time, because this was a dream come true.
Yeah. So then at that point, the son comes down and says, "Cap, we have an emergency," and the emergency is basically that reporting that Ultimatum took the plane hostage. So we cut to page 9, where they're at some base somewhere in Europe, and the plane, it's obviously a place where it's kind of like an airport hangar, with a runway, and so they're setting up for everything, and they're taking the hostages, and the Flag Smasher gets on to record a message. And he says, "Citizens of the world, I am the Flag Smasher. Earlier today, I and several agents of ULTIMATUM, which stands for the Underground Liberated, Totally Integrated Mobile Army to Unite Mankind, used our advanced technology to hijack an American airliner and took its 110 passengers hostage. What kind of man would commit such a crime? I'll tell you. I'm a man without a country. It's an act of choice. I believe that the idea of countries, imaginary boundaries dividing men from their brothers, is dangerous. My aim, ULTIMATUM's aim, is to see all national boundaries erased, all symbols of separatism destroyed. The passengers I hold are just plain people. I mean them no harm, but I will harm them if that's what it takes to get my point across. My point now is to prove that Captain America, that champion of separatism and national vanity, beat me in our first encounter by sheer luck, not because his position was morally superior. In exchange for the release of the hostages, I demand that Captain America surrender himself to us so I can execute him on worldwide television. If you're listening, Captain, I will give you my specific instructions on how to surrender. If you decide not to surrender, all of the hostages will be killed and the blood will be on your hands. And then he gives him the longitude and latitude and gives him, stay by for further instructions. So Cap thinks to himself, now he's flying in a borrowed Avengers Quinjet. Flag Smasher has gotten even more fanatical than when we last fought. From the sound of it, I wonder how he assembled his terrorism group so fast. Can there be that many who share his warped political views? If I surrender, there's no guarantee that Flag Smasher will honor his word to free the hostages, and I'll be in no position to help them. But if I don't surrender, I may be risking all of their lives. My best bet is to use the time I have left before the deadline to find the hostages and free them. Let's see, that gives me 4 hours minus the 2 hours it takes to fly across the ocean. Not much breathing room. And then he reaches out to SHIELD and other agencies and basically looking for a place, an abandoned place that has a runway where he could have taken the airplane. And there were only really 4 locations within a certain radius of when the plane went off the blip. So 3 of them were covered, and Cap covered the 4th one. So he lands the Quinjet, he gets out into his little sky cycle, and he looks for a base, and he finds a sentry station, and he busts in through the glass, and there's two guards there, ULTIMATUM guards, and they fire the machine gun, but Cap stops them just in time and says, look, you're ULTIMATUM, right? And the guy says, I will tell you nothing, swine. One of those, huh? And then he threatens him. And he says, have you ever wondered how much pressure it takes to cause permanent damage to the ligaments in a hand? You want to find out? And he starts squeezing the hand. But the ULTIMATUM guy says, well, we all been briefed on you, America. You're far too honorable to torture for information. You do not frighten me. Blast. He knows I'm bluffing. All right, we'll take off your uniform. You can do this easy or the hard way. And of course, he chooses the hard way and knocks him out. So he says he thinks to himself, these terrorists play by different rules than the average criminal I face. How am I supposed to get information out of people who'd sooner throw their life away than betray their cockamamie cause? This joker had me pegged all right. I'm not willing to stoop to their level in order to win. My code of ethics won't permit me. If I'm going to pull this keeper off, I'm going to have to rely on subterfuge and surprise. So he goes and he changes into a uniform. He puts the shield behind him in his back, throws away the weapons, but he does hold on to one that he needs as a prop in order to pass himself off as an ULTIMATUM agent. And then he says, I just hope nobody notices how strange my back looks with the shield stuck under my coat. Thank you, Gruenwald. Thank you for... Now, Paul Neary didn't do, I think, an adequate job because I think the shield's bigger than what it looks like. So I think almost Gruenwald had to explain it that way. But thank you for pointing that out. So he walks right into the base because who suspects, right? He's dressed as one of them. He goes up to a guy and knocks him out. pulls him into like a coat closet or something. And he says, tell me where the hostages are being held. And he says, I don't have time for this. He says, I'd rather die before I betrayed the cause. Kill me. See if I'm lying. And Cap says again, my bluff has failed. No time left for delicacy. I hate resorting to this. Better bind this guy so he doesn't betray my presence. So he knocks the guy out. So then he goes off and he sees these various agents getting on these flying skis, right? And so he jumps onto them, but before he does that, he sneaks up on a guy, and he says, "I'm glad Holly and Ram aren't here to see this. I'm not particularly proud of having to use these terrorist guerrilla tactics, but 110 lives are at stake." And he knocks out this guy from behind. With so little time left before the deadline, I can't waste any time fighting fair. Sure hope I can figure out how to work these things, which he ends up doing. Apparently there's a device within the helmet you move with your tongue. So he shoots off. And he ends up finding the monastery. I mean, he basically follows the road, realizing that the bus had to take it there. So he goes there, and he reaches the monastery, and again, he knocks out the first guy. And he thinks to himself, I can't believe Flag Smashers pushed me this far. Every second that goes by, I'm forced to compromise my ideas of fighting fair. So he keeps coming back to that. So he goes in and he sees the hostages. Now there's a bunch of agents there. He sees 4 of them, and some of them are far away, but they all have automatic weapons. So he tells this one to come here, and he knocks him out. And the time's running out because the Flag Smasher gave him a deadline, and if he doesn't show up, he's going to start killing the hostages. So he basically goes and knocks out the first guy. There's a couple more, and he sends the jet skis there to I guess kind of distract them, and he throws his shield at the one that's farthest away. And the one that's closest to him basically takes the machine gun and starts firing on the crowd. He just starts killing people. And Cap says to himself, my God, he opened up to the crowd. No. And he grabs the prop machine gun that he kept with him, and he reacts faster than he thinks. It would take 5 seconds to reach the terrorist and wrench the gun from his hands. In that time, scores of innocents would die. There's only one way to reach him faster. And he shoots him. And he says, good Lord, what have I done? Now, the crowd's happy. They're like, Cap, you saved us. How many were hit? And somebody says, 4, I think. Which one of them died? Minutes later, he thinks to himself, the terrorists have been bound. The hostages are boarding the buses. And I found the man I shot, dead. And the one guy says to him, what? You're bringing that body of that murderer aboard? Yes. When you are all safe, I intend to avenge him and my honor. The end for now. So this next issue 322, because that's heavy stuff, right? That's really heavy stuff. And rather than you and I talk about it right now, I think we should just get right into 322 because we want to hear what's going in Cap's mind. Because Mark Gruenwald wrote, I think most of this is in first person, right? Is a kind of like an ongoing monologue inside Steve's head. So I'm gonna read most of it because I think it's really important stuff. Now on the cover of 322, it's a really cool cover of Flag Smasher on top of Cap fighting in this blizzard. And this one is done by Paul Neary, but it was inked by Joe Rubenstein, our pal Joe Rubenstein. Inside the issue, the credits are, and I have to get to the last page for the credits, but this one is the same as last. You have Mark Gruenwald, writer, Paul Neary, penciler, John Beatty, embellisher, Diana Albers, letterer, and Ken Fedowitz, colorist, and Mike Carlin, editor. This story is called The Chasm. So we have Captain America, and he's coming in through a parachute, and a bunch of SHIELD agents coming in through a parachute, and they're coming down into the base that Flag Smasher was at, right? Because he had just left the monastery while rescuing the hostages, but now there's all these agents dropping in on Ultimatum. The name's Captain America. For more years than I care to remember, I've been a soldier in the war against oppression, injustice, and crime. Due to a special process I once underwent, my entire body has been enhanced to the peak of human potential. Through rigorous training and constant practice, I had honed my body to be a highly efficient fighting machine, a fact I'm certain these men will attest to, once they recover, that is. So there's this battle going on, again, between SHIELD agents and Ultimatum, and Cap's just tearing through them, looking for Flag Smasher. Cap's basically thinking about what's going on and what brought him here. So he on page 3, he says, Ultimatum's goal is to unite mankind by abolishing the concept of nationalism, which they feel gives people a sense of separatism and superiority over others. To achieve this end, they launch terrorist attacks against symbols of nationalism. These attacks may not cause a single nation to weaken, but they sure do capture the media's attention. You might guess that as a living symbol of America, I make an irresistible target for these people. That's right. I'm just one man who's dedicated his life to the ideals of freedom, justice, and equality. Some folks misunderstand me. They think I represent the American government, its political system, or its official policies. I don't. I represent the American dream, the notion that human beings should have the opportunity to become their I represent the American dream, the notion that human beings should have the opportunity to better their lives and attain their noblest aspirations. Being Captain America is the fulfillment of my American dream. No one forced me to take the name or represent the ideals. I chose to. The responsibility has weighed heavily on me at times. But I do my best. I try to set a good example. I try to fight the good fight. If Ultimatum had peacefully promoted their anti-nationalist philosophy, I would have defended their right to express their point of view. But instead, they coerced people to listen to them and placed the lives of innocents in jeopardy. That was the first thing that made me mad.
And I think we've learned that we don't want to get Cap mad.
It's true.
It's a slow burn. You know, it takes a lot to tick off Cap, but you don't want to do it.
The other thing that makes him angry is guns. You'll notice that everyone around here uses guns except me. I believe that guns are for killing, and killing is the ultimate violation of individual rights, the ultimate denial of freedom. I never carry a gun. I have never taken another person's life until 3 hours ago. It began when Ultimatum's agents hijacked an American airliner and took 110 citizens hostage. In exchange for their freedom, Ultimatum wanted me to surrender myself to them. If I did that, I knew there was no way I could guarantee the hostages' release. Instead, I located their base here and went undercover as one of them. I succeeded in locating the hostages and subduing most of their captors when an Ultimatum agent began firing into the crowd. Every second I delayed might cost another life. I had no time to reach him, no weapon to throw at him, so I shot him with that gun that went with my disguise. The image of that man being smashed through a stained glass window by the impact of my bullets haunts me. Under the circumstances, perhaps I had no choice. It was one life, his against the many hostages he could have killed. Still, I curse myself for not planning better, for not preventing such a situation from arising. I'm angry at myself as I am at them. And no matter how many of they fall before my shield, my anger is still not spent. I am hoping that if I can capture the leader of Ultimatum, the man known only as Flag Smasher, I might quell the beast raging inside me. The problem is that no one has seen him since the air raid began 20 minutes ago. So he goes on, finds Flag Smasher, who is leaving in a helicopter. He grabs onto the helicopter, and he basically makes him fire at him, which the ricochets from the shield go up into the propeller. And then they fight, which causes Flag Smasher to lose control, and the helicopter then hits one of the mountains in the Alps and crashes, and they fall into the snowbanks. So this is far away from the base. So Cap, he wakes first, and he thinks, I stagger towards Flag Smasher's half-buried body. It looks like the plummet took its toll more on him than me. I couldn't quite bring myself to feel sorry for him. Good thing, too. He had me suckered, but I rolled with it. I'll never underestimate him again. So Flag Smasher stands up and he says, I hate you, Captain. I hate your self-righteousness, your moral smugness. You're not bright enough to see what a relic of outmoded values you are. Flag Smasher's rhetoric doesn't make me any angrier than I already am. Let him rant and rave all he wants. I won't waste my breath trying to convince him of the spaciousness of his worldview. What is it about fanaticism that makes men such tireless soldiers? It's as if the more improbable it is they'd ever attain their goals, the harder they are able to fight. I wonder if people say the same thing about me. Does my love for America dream border on fanaticism? Is it improbable I'll ever attain my goals? The realization of where I've slid clears my minds of abstract questions, but my warning comes too late. My opponent hurls himself over the edge of the chasm. So as they're fighting, Flag Smasher falls over the edge. The blizzard is getting worse and worse and worse. So Cap can't figure out how far Flag Smasher fell, but he feels it's pretty far. And he says, suddenly I'm aware of the deadly cold. The driving wind begins to sting like hot needles. Nothing to do now but try to survive the storm. I use my shield as a shovel to dig a man-sized burrow. Inside, I hug myself to keep warm. And images of those enemies whose deaths I recently witnessed do a danse macabre before my eyes. And it's images of MODOK, who we mentioned, Porcupine, who we mentioned died, and also Red Skull. It's been a bloody year. I wonder if Flag Smasher's face will join the others. About an hour later, the storm has let up. I venture out. I peer over the edge and fancy I see Flag Smasher's body at the bottom of the chasm. If I were smart, I'd stay put, build a better shelter, and rest until morning. But if I did, Flag Smasher wouldn't have a chance of surviving the night, assuming he's still alive right now. But do I have to go out of my way to save him? Didn't I promise to avenge the ultimatum agent I killed? Wouldn't seeing Flag Smasher, the man who nurtured the fellow's fanaticism, dead, constitute my vengeance? It looks like a long way down. I better get there before the moon sets. It takes me about an hour to make it to the bottom of the chasm. My arms feel like sandbags hanging from them. My calves feel like day-old spaghetti. I wander about looking for Flag Smasher. I finally see a glint of reflected moonlight from his belt insignia. He's not moving. The snow around him has not been disturbed in a long while. I unbury him from the snow. He's lying. He groans a bit. He's still alive. It seems though his right leg is twisted funny. So even Cap's having a little bit of a crisis of faith. So he goes and he makes a little bit of a splint from the debris that was there, and he drags him to a new little cave that he digs out with his shield. He closes it up because he's more afraid of frostbite than suffocation. It's as black as death here in the womb of the mountain, as silent as oblivion. I was hoping our respiration and our body heat would warm us up the air a bit. I don't feel any different. With his cloak wrapped around him like a blanket, Flag Smasher begins to shiver. I can hear the chattering of his teeth. He's not going to last till morning. Unless we seriously try to pull our body heat. I huddle next to him in the dark. My mind drifts in and out of sleep. When I go under, I dream I'm in an iceberg in the North Atlantic. I'm only vaguely aware when Smasher's body stops shivering. At one point, I hear him moan. Where am I? I answer, you're alive, and that's all you need to know. So not only does he go out of his way to save him at his own peril, but then he huddles with him for body warmth. I mean, and this is a man he really despises.
Yeah, I mean, he's gone above and beyond here to save the guy that he swore he was going to wreak vengeance upon.
So he carries Flag Smasher out, who eventually wakes, and he says, "Captain America, put me down at once. What's the meaning of this? What have you?" And Cap says, "I've saved your life. I could have let you die, but I didn't." So he goes and he turns his shield over and he puts him on there and acts as a sled. And Flag Smasher says, "If you expect these heroic gestures of yours will in any way make me more sympathetic towards your insipid patriotic cause, think again. And that's not why I do this, Flag. I'm doing this out of love for humanity, my reverence for life, concepts beyond your notions of patriotism. I love humanity too, Captain, but I'm not do the same for you." So Cap says, "Like it or not, you're going to listen to me, Flag Smasher. I want to address some false notions I think you have of me. First of all, I'm not a knee-jerk patriot. I don't believe in my country, right or wrong. I support America and its concept, its essence, its ideal, its political system, its foreign and domestic policies, its vast book of laws. I'm not America's official advocate of any of that. What I represent are the principles that America's politics, laws, and policies are based upon: freedom, justice, equality, opportunity." Then Flag Smasher says, "Then why alienate the rest of the world with America in your name? Why don't you call yourself Captain Freedom, Captain Justice?" I'd be glad to answer that for you right now, but I think I hear something, and it's an aircraft, a copter. And sure enough, it's Ultimatum. So they come, and because at this whole time, the homing transmitter Flag Smasher had. Flag Smasher thinks, "I could order them not to shoot, spare Captain America's life as he did mine. Then we would be even. No, I shall not give such order. To do so would be a sign of weakness." So Cap then runs behind Flag Smasher, pulls the shield out from underneath him, uses that to stop the two men shooting at him. Even though he's tired, he overcomes, and then he runs towards the helicopter, and there's a female agent who's shooting at him, and then tries to pull a knife on him, and he stops her. He knocks her back. He ties them all up, and counts the fact that there's a gun missing, and tells Flag Smasher, "Flag Smasher, have you seen the other gun that was lying here? And this odd trail in the snow leading from where you are to where it dropped? Hand it over, Flag. No jokes. You want it, Captain? Come and get it. And while you're coming, I want to tell you I truly appreciate our little talk today. It helped me get a better idea of the man you are, a man worthy of my profound contempt. I despise you for your fanatical devotion to your ideals. I hate that you have proven my physical superior twice now. I don't deserve a foe as grand as you. You must die." But he throws the weapon instead. "But I'm no fool, Captain. It's unlikely I'll succeed today, but someday, when your back is turned, rest assured, I'll put a bullet in it." Cap thinks, not much I could say to that. So I bind Flag Smasher and load him and his cronies aboard the chopper and take off. Ironic, this whole affair began with Ultimatum hijacking a U.S. aircraft and ends with me hijacking an Ultimatum aircraft. So he goes to the back where the two SHIELD agents were left, and he turns him over. Flag Smasher says to him, "You're going to regret saving my life, Captain. I'll give you my word on that." And Cap ends thinking to himself, "Wrong, Flag Smasher. Life is precious, even yours." So where do we start? I mean, wow, that's a lot of stuff to take in there. I mean, Cap's obviously struggling with the fact that he had to take a life. And I think Gruenwald's kind of pointed out, in the stories leading up to this, right, with all the killing that's been going on, right? The Serpent Society killing MODOK, Scourge of the Underworld going around and killing. You have Cap questioning himself if his motives are outdated, if his motives are...
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I think one of the things that Gruenwald is by planting this sort of almost self-doubt in Cap's mind, he's also addressing really what a lot of maybe readers had been writing and saying, right? I mean, is Cap outmoded? Are his values and his principles outmoded? And I think what Gru is going to be doing here, as he continues writing for this series, is he's categorically saying no. Cap isn't outmoded. Maybe what some readers think Cap stands for isn't in fact what Cap stands for, and he clarifies that. And I think he does that in a very strategic way.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the way Mark wrote this particular issue, because the entire thing was a monologue from Cap's thought. And he went from questioning himself to stating what it is that he stands for. And, this story is going to haunt him, right? It's going to haunt him. In the very next issue, he has to deal with the bad press of killing the terrorist, which leads to Super Patriot trying to step up to be that hero for America. So next issue we have the introduction of John Walker. We will save that for another podcast. But this is a big story that sets up future stories of Cap struggling with his place in the modern world.
Yeah, and one of the things I love this issue, because it comes up, right, at least once a month or once every month and a half in the Captain America comic book fans Facebook group, because the question is, has Cap ever killed anyone? And invariably this issue comes up. Folks bring this issue up, and other folks bring up Golden Age Cap stories in which Cap used firearms quite a bit. And so it's always a lively debate in the Facebook group, and I enjoy those debates quite a lot.
Yeah, I found it interesting, and I don't know, was Mark Gruenwald retconning here? Because he said, I had never killed before 3 hours ago. Was he saying that he never killed ever? Was he saying he didn't kill outside of war, time of war, during time of peace? I don't know. I think a lot of our Golden Age Cap fans probably would debate that.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely a lot of the grist for the mill there. But I do think Gruenwald was undertaking a bit of retcon, and also just as I said earlier, just drawing a strategic line in the sand that this is who Cap is and this is what Cap stands for, and just sort of reaffirming and clarifying for the readership that moving forward that this is who Cap is. Yep.
Yeah. Well, Bob, I know you're a Mark Gruenwald fan, and I am too, and many of our listeners. So I think it's really exciting to announce that next episode is an interview with Catherine Schuler Gruenwald, who was the wife of the late great Mark Gruenwald. So she's going to come on and discuss a lot of stuff about Mark's time on Captain America. We'll discuss various stories that are highlights during that 10-year career, some of the characters that he developed, his love for the character, what happened at the end, and unfortunately his untimely death at a very young age, and also what she has done afterwards to kind of continue his legacy with the Ashegraph, which is the taking Mark Gruenwald's ashes and combining it with ink and putting it into the stories that he loved so much. So it's a real fascinating interview, and that's coming up next episode. So we'll have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, that's going to be, but you're not going to want to miss that podcast if you're a Cap fan.
So Bob, we have another review on Apple that I wanted to share. So this one comes from Mitch Halleck, who is also a member of our Captain America Comic Book Fans Facebook group. And Mitch also actually runs Terrificon, which is it's Connecticut's largest Comic-Con. So, but anyway, he wrote, as a lifelong Cap fan, I'm so glad to hear a podcast totally devoted to it. The hosts are passionate about the subject matter, and you can hear it come through. I love hearing reviews of the great DeMatteis Zek run, which I think that was episode 4 when we reviewed the Deathlock Lives. he wrote, growing up in the New Haven, Connecticut area, it was a great time as Mike Zeck lived in the area and would shop at my local comic shop in the 80s when these issues were coming out. As a teenager looking to be a comic book artist, then it was great to talk with them. And then he goes on to say, I'll be listening to your future shows no matter what. So thanks, Mitch. We really appreciate that. And if you want to also get mentioned here on the podcast, please leave a 5-star review and on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, and we'll be sure to mention that here. And if you listen on other platforms, please do subscribe. We really do appreciate that, and we'll continue to put these out every Wednesday. So, Bob, as always, it's been fun wrapping Cap with you.
Yeah, I mean, you got to love this story. I love the Flag Smasher, and I'm so glad that we had a chance to dive into this one.
Absolutely. Well, I'm Rick Verbanis. That's Bob Lucius, and you've been listening to the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.